master's in philosophy, spent years teaching feminist theory and philosophy of emotion at the university level, and led teams through organizational change in healthcare. She's a certified somatic-informed coach, and she's raising 4 kids, including children with special needs, while going through perimenopause and recovering from her own identity-level burnout. She didn't arrive at this work through research. She arrived through her own life, and that's exactly what makes her worth listening to. Mindi, today I would like to know, what does self-abandonment actually feel like in the body?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Because a lot of times I think that we're experiencing it, but we don't have the language for it.
Mindi has a master's in philosophy, spent years teaching feminist theory and philosophy of emotion at the university level, and led teams through organizational change in healthcare. She's a certified somatic-informed coach, and she's raising 4 kids, including children with special needs, while going through perimenopause and recovering from her own identity-level burnout. She didn't arrive at this work through research. She arrived through her own life, and that's exactly what makes her worth listening to. Mindi, today I would like to know, what does self-abandonment actually feel like in the body?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Because a lot of times I think that we're experiencing it, but we don't have the language for it. Self-abandonment feels like running yourself completely dry for people you love, and then being confused about why you're so thirsty. That's the simplest way I know how to say it, but I want to go a little deeper with that, because the thing about self-abandonment, the thing that makes it so hard to see and so hard to change, is that you usually can't see it from the inside. You don't experience it as abandoning yourself. You experience it as being responsible, being dependable, the person people can count on. So you think you're being a good partner, you think you're being a good mother, a good colleague, a good friend. And you are, in many real ways you are, but underneath all of that doing for others, something quieter is happening. You're not on the list. Not at the bottom, off the list entirely. And it doesn't feel like deprivation because you were never taught it should feel like anything else. Here's the part I think about most. Self-abandonment isn't something you choose. It's something you learned early enough that it didn't feel like learning. It just felt like reality. Like that's just how things were. You downloaded a set of instructions for how to survive, how to be safe, how to be loved. And those instructions were very specific. It told you how to earn your own worth, not assume it, earn it. How to protect yourself from rejection by making yourself indispensable. How to manage your own anxiety by focusing on someone else's needs, because when you're solving their problem, you don't have to feel your own discomfort. And how to be a woman, because the instructions we get as women are not instructions for taking up space, or they're not instructions for trusting our own needs, the signals of our body, or resting without justification. They're instructions for being capable, but not too demanding, present for everyone, and quietly absent for ourselves. And I ran those instructions faithfully for years, not because I was weak, because I was genuinely good at doing what the situation required of me. And that capacity is one of my greatest strengths. And it's also exactly how I ended up in a situation of chronic self-abandonment. So here's what it actually feels like from the inside, to your question. It feels like a constant low-grade reaching. You're giving your time, your attention, your energy, your patience, your care, your tenderness. And somewhere underneath all of that giving, there is this quiet waiting for that giving to come back, waiting for someone to notice all that you're giving, waiting for the reciprocity that the logic of self-abandonment promises, but never quite delivers. And it doesn't come. Not because the people in your life don't love you, but because you're running a program that has instructions for everyone else's needs and almost no instructions for your own needs. You don't think the system is broken. You think, I must not be doing it right. So what do? You try harder. You give more. You wait even more quietly. You take up less space. You spend years collecting crumbs and calling it enough. That loop, the giving, the waiting, the confusion, the trying harder, that's what self-abandonment feels like from the inside. It's not dramatic. It's not visible. It's just quietly exhausting. Lonely in a really specific way that's hard to name because you're surrounded by people who need you.
Why is your body done with self-abandonment?
Because your body, my body, has been telling me the truth this whole time. There's a moment before every yes that your mouth says when your body says no. A small one, a tightening in the chest, a breath that doesn't quite complete, a slight drop in your stomach. The calculation, it's rapid, it's automatic, mostly unconscious. Who needs this from me? What happens if I say no? What will they think? And you override the no every time. Your body was the only honest voice in the room all along. And most of us learn early and completely to talk right over it, to override the no. I did this for nearly 5 decades, and my body, for most of that time, adapted. That's what nervous systems do. They adapt. Mine learned to stay activated, to stay vigilant, to suppress signals that might slow me down. Because slowing down did not feel safe for my body and my nervous system. It wasn't part of the instructions. And then my body said, no more. For me, the first time this happened was in my 30s. I was in a PhD program, teaching 4 to 6 courses every semester, trying to write my dissertation, carrying the weight of an identity I'd spent so many years building. And one day in a movie theater, a panic attack arrived in my life. And it didn't stop for months. I kept going, of course. That was the only instructions that I had. But the panic attacks didn't stop. And then sleep could reach. I was brittle in a way I couldn't explain, disconnected from my own life in a way that frightened me. At the time, I was teaching feminist theory. I could explain self-abandonment in an essay in front of a class, but I had no idea what it felt like in my body to stop doing it. I didn't know stopping was possible. Eventually, I left graduate school without my PhD. 7 years. Nearly 6 figures of student loan debt, and a body that had finally said enough before I was ready to hear it. I carried shame about that for a long time. The story I told myself was that I had failed. I quit. I couldn't handle it. The story that's true is that my body was the only honest voice in the room, and it finally got loud enough that I had no choice but to hear it. I had to listen. And this is where I want to offer a reframe, because I work primarily with women in midlife, and I hear a version of the same question constantly. Why now? This is the question that you asked. Why is everything harder now? Why can't I cope the way that I used to? Why is the old operating system, why are the old instructions not working like they're supposed to? And I want to answer that directly. Most of your adult life, your body's been adapting brilliantly, faithfully, to the load you were carrying. Your nervous system is so extraordinary at this. It learns to stay activated under chronic stress, to suppress what might slow you down, to run the self-abandonment logic without flagging it as problematic, because the hormonal environment you were living in helped hold it all together. Estrogen and progesterone aren't just reproductive hormones. They've been quietly stabilizing your nervous system, modulating your stress response, muting the anxiety that's been simmering under extraordinary competence this whole time. So when perimenopause arrives and those hormones shift, the lid comes off completely. And it's not because you're getting weaker, it's not because you're falling behind, it's because the hormonal scaffolding that was helping your body hold the chronic load that you were carrying without collapsing has changed. And the nervous system that's been running on chronic stress and self-abandonment logic for decades suddenly doesn't have the same buffer that it's always had. Everything your body has been holding, sometimes for decades, gets so much harder to hold. But that is not breakdown. It's revelation. Your body is not betraying you in midlife. It is finally having enough leverage physiologically, hormonally, and neurologically to insist on what it needed all along. Midlife isn't the beginning of your decline. For many of the women I work with, it's the first time in their lives that their body's been loud enough that they couldn't keep overriding it, even if they wanted to. So yes, there are physical things that become necessary. Who actually takes you seriously? Magnesium, because your nervous system burns through it under chronic stress. Real protein, especially early in the day. More than you think. And movement that completes the stress cycle rather than adding more activation to an already activated system. And these things matter. They're real. But underneath all of them, harder and more necessary than any supplement or protocol, is this: learning to be the first call instead of the last. Not as a productivity strategy, not as another thing you're supposed to be doing better, but as a genuine embodied shift in what you believe you're allowed. You've been off your own list for a long time at this point. Your body in midlife is requiring you to change that. It's not asking anymore. It's requiring you to change that. It's not a punishment. It's not your body turning against you. It's your body finally having enough leverage to insist on what it needed, what you needed all along. The old logic was borrowed. It was never native to you. It was imprinted on you. Borrowed code. Outdated, insufficient, running a life it was never designed for. But that borrowed code can be updated. Not all at once, not through force, but slowly with the right support, by learning that there are different instructions available. That the version of you who exists before all of that conditioning is still in there. She didn't go anywhere. She just got very quiet. And midlife, as hard as it is, might be exactly the moment she finally gets to come home. I'm Mindi. I'm a burnout and capacity coach for high-performing women, and what I just described is the work I do. If something in this landed in your body, not just in your mind, but somewhere in your body, I want you to sit with that for a minute. And you can find the link to the helpful email below.